Hey everybody, it's EJ from Eyedesyn.com, and today I'm going to be showing you the most important piece of Xpresso that you should know. So if you know no Xpresso at all, this is the Xpresso you need to know. So this Xpresso I'm talking about is called Set Driver and Set Driven, and basically it's a super simple way to get into using Xpresso in your day-to-day workflow. So think about when if you used After Effects before, the pick whip. When you can link position fields or rotation fields, just kind of link values together. So that's basically what the set driver, set driven can do inside of Cinema 4D. So again, if you're afraid of Xpresso, this is the tutorial for you, because I'm going to show you how you can really make Xpresso accessible for you and how it can really improve your day-to-day workflow. So let's jump right in. All right, so set driver, set driven, how is this going to help you in your day-to-day workflow, and why is it important to learn just a little bit of Xpresso? I hope this tutorial is going to kind of give you some ideas for how you can try to take baby steps, dip your feet into the Xpresso pool, and just see how powerful it can be and how it can help you out in your workflow. So I'm going to be demonstrating a few different ways that Xpresso helps me, and specifically with the set driver, set driven option. And it's so easy, it's so simple. If you know any Xpresso at all, this should be what you know. If it intimidates you at all, this is super easy. It's a really easy concept to kind of grasp, and I liken it to if you're used to After Effects and you know you have your pick whip, so you can link fields like position to other position fields just by clicking the little pick whip thing and dragging it to another layer. This is pretty much exactly like that. It's very similar to that. So the set driver, set driven. So what I'm going to do is, for my first example, and I use this a lot, I'm going to go into my MoGraph field here, grab a MoText object, and one of the things that's annoying about the MoText object is that I can put in whatever I want in here. So let's just say set driver, or set driven, because we'll actually drive this. And let's just align this to the middle here. And you'll notice that, one of the biggest pains of the MoText object is, say you have a scene with a whole bunch of text in it. Not only do you have to go into your MoText object and set the text, but then you also have to double click on the MoText object itself and rename it so you actually know what the heck each object's, or what each text object's, what text is enclosed in that text object. So this is kind of the nice thing about After Effects in a way, where if you have a text layer, whatever you type in that text layer or in that text field, it actually updates the layer with that the content in that text layer. So if you want to do that same kind of thing, this is where the power of the set driver, set driven really comes in handy. So what we want to do, and you can do this either way, you can either have whatever you have in this field drive whatever the name of our MoText object is, or you can have whatever you type in this MoText object field to update what the actual layer or MoText object text contains. So let's just set these to completely different things. Let's just do Eyedesyn in here. And what I want to do is have whatever I type in here actually update the text here. So to do that, we just need to go to the Basic tab, and that's going to actually have the name of our layer. So you'll notice if I just type in MoText here, that's actually updating that up here. So it's just the name of our MoText object. So what I want to do is have this field, this text field, drive this text field here that actually outputs our 3D MoText. So it's very, very easy. This is what set driver, set driven's all about. I'm going to right click on name, this little name field. I'm going to go to expressions, and I'm going to hit set driver. So this is going to be the driver field to then drive another field. So I'm going to go to my object tab, and then I'm going to right click on the text, and then go to expressions, and then I'm going to say set driven. Now set absolute and set relative only really comes into play with position values and stuff like that. But basically what set driven absolute and relative means is that absolute, when it comes to position, means that it's going to just set it from the absolute 0. So if you have an object that is 50 centimeters in the Y, it's going to set that to absolute 0. So all those are going to be 0. But if it's relative, it's going to be relative to that position. So it's going to maintain all those position values and stuff like that. But we're not really, I'm kind of jumping the gun here. But either way, you can set either of these. Because we're not dealing with any position information or rotation data, we're just dealing with text information. So you can really set either of these. So I'm just going to say set driven absolute. And you're going to notice that once I do that, our motext now updates in my viewport and reflects whatever's typed in the actual motext object name. And one thing you'll notice here is that when you hit that set driven, we now have this Xpresso tag. And basically what it just did by setting up our set driver, set driven, is you just did some Xpresso right there, my friend. You just made it so our motext name now connects to and inputs into the motext object text here. So you just did some Xpresso, you just built 2 nodes just by doing that set driver, set driven. So now I can go up here and type in Eyedesyn, and then that automatically updates the text field here. So now we don't even have to go into our motext object anymore to change anything. We can just change it all from the object manager right there, and magic. Whoa. So it's very, very cool. That's a really nice time saver right there. And then you can always go and just duplicate this. And we can now have, boom, and have that update too. So I just duplicated that layer. We still have our Xpresso tag intact. You can duplicate this as many times as you want. Exciting. So check that out. So now we have 3 motext objects just with a little bit of Xpresso that took seconds to set up. And in the long term, if you're making a bunch of these layers, you're really saving a ton of time just by being able to control the name or the actual 3D text printout of whatever the motext object's making by just changing the name of the motext objects here. And Xpresso will not help you actually spell correctly, but you get the point. The changing name, that's out of order, but you get the point. So that's one really simple way to use set driver, set driven. Another way that is really handy, along the same lines with changing text and stuff like that. So if you're not familiar with Motec or Spline Shader, what the Spline Shader does is allows you to create text as a material. And I have a tutorial all about that, and I'll link to it in my blog post here. But let's go ahead and just grab a Spline Shader. And it's kind of just off the screen, but Spline Shader, we can go in here, and basically you can see that we now have some text as a material. And I'm going to go and apply that to my cube. And actually, let's apply this to just a plane. So now we can actually see this. Let's have this face -z. So now you can see that if I render this, we now have some text as a material applied to our plane here. Let's go ahead and let's just change the line texture to a solid color. Let's enable a fill, and that'll make it a solid text here. And again, there's so many. I have a tutorial all about what the Spline Shader is, but basically what I want to do is be able to control the text field here by, say, what the name of the material is here. So I have, again, just like we had our object name for our motext object and then the actual text field, what I want to do is maybe you want to have whatever the material name is drive the text in the text field here for your spline shader text. So again, I'm going to go to the basic tab of my material. So I'm going to click on my material. We have this basic tab, and there is the name of our material. And by default, it's set to just MAT. So I'm going to go and right click on that. And what I want to do is have whatever I type as the name of my material be the driver and control the text in my spline shader. So I'm going to do, let's see, set driver and set driven. And you'll now see that we now have MAT, M-A-T, as the text in our spline shader. And that's really awesome because now we can just close that material field altogether and control our spline shader text just by changing the name of our material name. So that's really handy. So that's just another really easy way to speed up your workflow. Again, if you have a lot of these spline shader materials, you can just easily duplicate this, apply this to a whole other plane, and hopefully this works. But apply that text one here, and let's just say A, and see if that updates. So unfortunately, since we only have this expression on this null, we would have to kind of recreate everything from the get-go. So that's the only downside of this, is it's not as easily duplicatable just due to how complicated this is versus just motext. But if you did want to create a new material, you would just have to do this whole rigmarole again, where you go into your material name, go to set driver, and go and do set driven. And there we go. Now we have that A as our material. So again, maybe a few more steps than the motext, but it's a lot easier to kind of just change things on the fly with the spline shader. So that is one handy way to do that. All right, so let's actually get away from like naming and using names for set driver, set driven, but let's actually use some kind of position values or being able to animate things. So one thing I like to use a lot is using our time, our project time, to kind of drive animations at a constant speed. So what I mean by this is, again, if you're used to After Effects and you're used to the expression of the word time multiplied by, and then you enter a number, and that means the project time times that number. So you can have a constant rotation value, say, in your project. So let's just demonstrate this in Xpresso in Cinema 4D terms. So basically what I want to do, so I'm going to hit Command D, and here we go into our project settings here. And you'll notice that we have this project time tab, and that holds the project time information. So what I can do is do a set driver on the project time and just do set driver. And what I can do is use the project time to drive values or properties on my cube. So let's say I want the project time to set a constant rotation or constant velocity rotation on the banking of my cube. So I already did the set driver on the project time, and now I'm going to do a set driven. And this is where the absolute and relative kind of come in. So if we have a value in here already, which we don't, and we want to maintain that and kind of add on to that current rotation, that's where we do the set relative, set driven relative. So if we have a banking of 30 degrees that's already in there, setting relative will then add on to that 30 degrees, and that 30 degrees will kind of be the start position. But I just want it to start from absolute 0. So that's where I'm going to start my set driven. So you'll see that no matter what value I put in here, it's always going to be 0 because we have that set driven absolute. So now if I hit play, you'll notice that we now have our project time outputting values and driving the rotation of our cube here. And that's really cool because now we can have a constant rotation based on project time. Now if I go into my cube here, or my Xpresso tag here, you'll see that I have the project time and I have that driving my rotation of my banking. So say we want to speed this up a little bit, because right now it's a little bit too slow. And one thing you'll notice is that if I go and get a result node, which a result node basically just shows you and outputs what an object's outputting. So you'll notice that when I stop here, we're not outputting 15, as in 15 frames. We're outputting 0.5 or 0.5 seconds. So 30 frames per second, that's going to be 1 second. And that's the result. So you'll notice that when we're at 1 second here, that's actually just a little bit towards 60 degrees. So I'm not quite sure how that math all adds up, where 1 second equals 57.296 degrees, but all I know is we want to speed this up. So again, we're not getting really nitty gritty into Xpresso here, because even I don't know all that much. But I do know if you want to speed something up, or if you want to say, take this project time and multiply whatever the output is to then get a higher value, and therefore will speed the rotation up, what we can do is go into a new node, go into calculate, and get a math node. Now what this is going to do is, now I'm going to feed in my project time, and what we can do, if I go into this math node, we have all these options here, and what we can do is multiply this by a number. Right now it's set to add, so we can add a value, or we can multiply it by a value, and you can set a second input here, or you can just set the number you want to multiply it by in this input too. So this is very simple math. So basically we'll be just multiplying the project time times whatever number we have in here. So let's do it. Let's say we want it to speed up 5 times as fast. So I'll put 5 in there, and then we'll output this new number to the rotation. Now when I hit play, you'll see our cube is rotating 5 times as fast as it did than before. I can do 10 times, and you can see it's going much faster. So basically what I want to demonstrate is that by using the set driver, set driven, and using the project time to kind of drive that stuff, you can have constant rotation, constant movement driven by a project time. Now you can also, you don't have to actually go into the project time here and do a set driver, set driven. There is actually a node called time, and it's the same exact thing. It's taking the time of it's taking your project time, and again, if I just create a new result node here and output here, you'll see it's doing the exact same thing as our project time node, but you can't do that with the set driver, set driven. But just FYI, if you did want to get the time node, or there, just so you know, there is a time node that you can use instead of the set driver, set driven method of having your project time here drive anything else. Here you can just grab it, just grab your time node from the Xpresso general and find it right there. So hopefully that made sense. Just more than one way to do that. All right, so a few more little shortcuts here. I like to use set driven, set driver. So say when you're making a material, right? You want a bump on your material. So let's go ahead and create a noise. Let's actually put this in a layer so we can have multiple noises going on here. Let's change that to fire. Fire's fun, and we'll just screen that. Maybe bring the scale up here a little bit. So we have our fancy noise here that took a lot of time to figure out how to make it look. And what we want to do is have that in the diffusion. So what you typically do is just copy that channel and paste that channel and just turn on diffusion. And let's just apply this onto, let's actually get a sphere. Spheres are more fun with textures. So let's just get a sphere here. And you'll see that we now have diffusion based on the noise. Now, the problem comes in when you're like, you know what? I don't like that noise. I want to go in here and maybe change it from gaseous to booyah, because booyah sounds really fun. And you'll notice that then you'd have to go to the diffusion and then do the same thing. And that's just a big pain in the butt. Or just go and copy the channel and then paste it back over again. You can see where I'm going with this. So with the set driver, set driven, we can actually go to our texture field here, go to set driver, go to our diffusion, go to the diffusion texture channel, and do set driven. So now, whatever we make changes to, so we can even add a whole new noise and screen it there, that's actually going to update in the diffusion channel because we link those two values, those two texture fields with Xpresso. So that's really, really fun and really super useful way to use set driver, set driven. And this is the same thing with colors too. So say if you're going for some kind of material where you want a bit of luminance and you want the luminance to be the same color as the color channel. So say I change this to like this pinkish. You can do the same thing, go to expressions, set driver, and go to the luminance and go to the color and set driven. And now we have the same color updated and it's updating to our luminance. So again, really super useful, time-saving things that you can do with the set driver, set driven. So that's in all the material stuff. And again, it creates these little Xpresso tags with everything kind of set up there. So it's doing Xpresso nodes behind the scenes, which is really fun. So I got a couple more examples for you. I don't want to wear you guys out too or overload you guys, but one thing that's really handy is say I have, let's go and create a spline here. My new handy dandy R17 spline tool here. A lot of fun. And what I'm going to do is just create a really simple sweep object here. So let's go and sweep this circle along this spline. And there we go. Now let's actually create, let's get a cone. And this cone is going to be our like arrowhead. So we're going to go and get a align to spline. And we want this to align to the spline right here. So then we actually have to make sure this is aligned properly. There we go. I think that's aligned properly. Oh, maybe not. Let's go to tangential. And there we go. Now it's aligned to the actual angle of our spline head here. So now we can adjust this, and there's the head of our arrow. So now what if we want to animate the growth? So I have my start and end here, but we want to connect that start growth with the actual position here. So right now you would have to animate those two things separately, but not anymore because now we know set driver, set driven, right guys? So let's go ahead, and what we're going to do is animate, or we're going to actually use the start growth to drive. So we're going to do set driver, and we're going to drive the position % here. So we're going to do absolute because we want to actually start at absolute 0. And now we can now control both our arrowhead cone with the start growth, and all controlled with one keyframe instead of those two. So again, we have start growth driving the position of our line to spline, and therefore moving our cone along this spline here. So that is really handy. You can adapt this to a lot of different things as well, using the sweep NURB to grow different things. You not only have the sweep object, but remember we also have, where is it? We also have spline wraps, and spline wraps also has the to and from, just like the sweep NURB. So keep that in mind with this kind of workflow with the set driver, set driven. Finally, let's go ahead and do one final fun thing and just kind of hopefully get your brain churning, your creative noggin thing, whatever you got going on over there. Get your gears turning with kind of the possibilities of what you can do with set driver, set driven. So I have a cube here. I have a lot of segments in the Y, and that is because I'm going to use a bend object, and I'm going to fit to parent, and now we have this bend strength here, right? Let's actually go ahead and bring in a squash and stretch as well. So we're going to do that, and we have this factor, right? And that's controlling the squash and stretch. But what if I wanted to control this factor with a null? So I'm going to grab a null, and one thing I'm going to do is, because I know that the squash and stretch factor starts at 100, I'm going to actually move my null up to 100. So you'll notice that when I go to then say I want my Y of my null to control and drive the percentage of the factor, I'm going to do this set driven relative because I want it to be relative to the value that's already in my null, so 100. Now if I set that to absolute, it would set it to 0, and we don't want that. So we're going to go, and if I move my null, that's actually controlling the squash and stretch. So you can see that my null value is 191, and so is my factor percentage here. So that's really cool. What if we want to actually control the bend strength with our null as well? So what I'm going to do is actually have the X of our null control and drive the bend. Whoop. And go to our strength here, and we'll do set absolute. And so now when I move my null in the positive X, we're going to have a positive strength here. So again, we have this in the X is 20, and since we're dealing with percentages and position, it's kind of messing up a little bit. It's not a one-for-one value, but you can see that we now have our bend controlled by movement in the null positions X field. So now we can control both the bend and the squash and stretch with just one null here. But you can see that the bend is really going out of control here, and we can fix that by double clicking on our bend here. And you'll notice we have a range mapper, which is basically taking an input, and that input is our null. And right now it's inputting a input of 0, or lower of 0 and upper of 100. And it's outputting 0 to 360. Now 360 is really, really high. And that's why with the littlest move here, it's making our bend go really crazy. So what we can do is actually map it so 100 doesn't make it go 360. Maybe it goes to 180. So you can see that now I can move my X position a lot more, and it bends a lot less. And we can actually bring that down even further, so it's actually outputting 90 instead of a higher rotation value, or angle value. So now we actually have a more manageable bending degrees there when we move our X position. That's all controlled with the range mapper, and range mapper is really important when it comes to really precisely getting your input values from a driver and outputting it to a driven object. And that's something for another tutorial. If you want to know a little bit more about range mappers, let me know. But I don't want to get too deep into this kind of basic Xpresso thing. So now we have this nice, cool, squash and stretchy, bendy cube character right now that is just controlled by one null. So hopefully this kind of opens your mind to the many ways you can use the set driver, set driven, and hopefully it gets you into looking more into all the possibilities of Xpresso, and hopefully get you exploring Xpresso a little more. I know when I first started, Xpresso was really intimidating to me, but the set driver, set driven is a really easy way to get into it and kind of understand how you can get Xpresso nodes working and not even really having to dive into Xpresso tags at all. One thing I really want to know is if you use or have used the set driver, set driven method before, and what you use it for to speed up your workflow. I'd really love to kind of share everyone's workflows and everyone kind of get better because of it. So if you have a really cool workflow improvement that you use set driver, set driven for, please post it in the comments. Would love to see it. Love for you guys to share your knowledge with everyone else. But that's basically it. That's set driver, set driven. It's one of the most important Xpresso things that you could probably learn if you don't really want to get in Xpresso at all. So hopefully that helped. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment field. If you want to see more of this type of workflow stuff, let me know. But that's it for me, and I'll see you guys in the next tutorial. Bye, guys.